Burgoyne sent forces down each side of the lake by land. He expected he would have to mount a full-scale siege. But a British officer quickly spotted a fatal flaw in the rebel defenses. About a mile southwest of Ticonderoga stood a hill that overlooked both forts. It remained undefended. If British guns could be hauled to the high ground, both Fort Ticonderoga and Mount Independence would be completely exposed. When astonished patriots spotted redcoats peering down from the hill on the afternoon of July 5th, American General Arthur Sinclair ordered both fortifications abandoned. The next morning, British troops raised the King's colors above Fort Ticonderoga. The Americans fled in two directions, with Burgoyne's men right behind them. After hours of tramping in the heat, those patriots heading east called a temporary halt at a tiny deserted frontier settlement called Hubbardton.
The morning after our retreat, orders came very early for the troops to refresh and be ready for marching. Some were eating, some were cooking, and all in a very unfit posture for battle. Then there was a cry, "The enemy are upon us." Ebenezer Fletcher, 2nd New Hampshire.
Ebenezer Fletcher was a 16-year-old from New Ipswich, New Hampshire. As the menacing line of redcoats moved closer, firing volleys as they came, the 2nd New Hampshire fired back, and then began to seek cover.
Many of our party retreated into the woods. I made shelter for myself and discharged my piece. But before I had time to reload it, I received a musket ball in the small of my back and fell with my gun cocked.
Elsewhere, the fighting intensified. In the fierce combat that followed, the Americans more than held their own against some of Britain's best-trained professional soldiers. In the end, the British won, but they were too tired to pursue the retreating Americans. Though in great pain, Ebenezer Fletcher decided to escape. He slipped away into the forest, eluded hungry wolves and bands of loyalists, and eventually made it home to New Ipswich, New Hampshire. Once he healed, he would return to serve out his 3-year enlistment in the Continental Army.
It does me no injury for my neighbor to say there are 20 gods or no God. It neither picks my pocket nor breaks my leg.
Most of the revolutionaries belonged to Protestant denominations, but there were Catholics and Jews among them too, as well as Muslims, whose faith had crossed the Atlantic on slave ships. Central to the philosophy of some of the most influential creators of the United States was their belief in a supreme being, but one who did not interfere in the affairs of men or distinguish between faiths. They were deists, and they believed it was each individual's responsibility to lead a virtuous life, which could only come from tolerance and a lifetime of learning, the pursuit of happiness.
The revolutionaries believed that the American people would have to be educated. Without education, there could be no virtue in the populace, and without virtue in the populace, the government would fail. Republics are based on authority coming from the bottom up, not like monarchies from the top down. So you require an educated, virtuous, they use that term over and over, drawing it from antiquity, virtuous population to sustain a republican government.
Our sister states of Pennsylvania and New York have long subsisted without any established religion at all. They have made the happy discovery that the way to silence religious disputes is to take no notice of them. Let us, too, give this experiment fair play. Thomas Jefferson.
To Lord Germain, I have the honor to inform your lordship that the enemy were dislodged from Ticonderoga and Mount Independence, and were driven on the same day beyond Skenesborough on the right and to Hubbardston on the left. General John Burgoyne.
The armies had been moving at a dizzying pace. Burgoyne's forces had reached Skenesborough by July 9th, but they had now outrun their gigantic supply train. Burgoyne decided to send his guns by water south on Lake George, but his men were to march through the woods to Fort Edward on the east bank of the Hudson, just 23 miles away. General Philip Schuyler, commander of the Continental Army's Northern Department, sent axemen into the woods to slow Burgoyne's overland advance. He would let the forest fight for him. The narrow path between Skenesborough and Fort Edward ran along a twisting stream called Wood Creek. The Americans felled trees every few feet on both sides of the road, so that their tangled branches made the path impassable. They also destroyed some 40 crude bridges that crossed and recrossed the creek, and used boulders to flood the boggy ground that surrounded it. It would take Burgoyne's men 3 exhausting weeks to turn the path into a road their wagons could navigate. And he was still a long way from his main objective, Albany.
Oh, the American war. I heard, I saw, I felt, smelled, and tasted its woes for 92 long months. Famines, sores, sicknesses, plagues, battles, houses ransacked and burned, towns depopulated, gardens made graves. Roger Lamb.
Among the men in Burgoyne's army was Irish-born Corporal Roger Lamb, who kept his memories alive in watercolors and in print. By now, 400 more Native Americans from the Great Lakes, Fox, Menominee, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Sauk, and Ho-Chunk, had joined Burgoyne. His Indian allies attacked retreating Patriot forces. In one instance, they killed 22 men and scalped their corpses to terrify those sent out in search of them.
This strikes a panic in our men, which is not to be wondered at, when we consider the hazards they run by being fired at from quarters. And the woods so thick they can't see 3 yards before them. And then to hear the cursed war whoop, which makes the woods ring for miles. General John Glover.
Settlers were attacked too, with little regard for their loyalties. A young woman named Jane McCrae, on her way to meet her loyalist fiancé, was killed. And when her scalp was brought into Burgoyne's camp, he threatened to hang the perpetrator.
We don't really know much about Jane McCrae. She seems to have had reddish-brown hair and been an average person. But very quickly, Jane McCrae becomes a blonde, and she has very long, beautiful hair. And she's pure and fair, and she's been plucked out of life right in her prime.
It was just too captivating and tragic and scary a thing. That became part of the propaganda aspect of the war. It was used against us.
What happens is the American propagandists are not simply attacking Indians, they're using it to attack the British themselves and British policy. It's that the British sponsor Indian warfare that kills Jane McCrae. And that becomes a very, very powerful piece of cultural argument.
Hundreds of Patriot soldiers continued to flee southward. By the end of July 1777, most of what was left of the American forces in the area had withdrawn to Saratoga, a small cluster of houses north of Albany.
To General Washington, our army is weak in numbers. I foresee that all this part of the country will soon be in their power unless we are speedily and largely reinforced. General Schuyler.
Washington had been shocked to learn of Ticonderoga's fall. But he also shared Nathanael Greene's view that General Burgoyne's triumphs may serve to bait his vanity and lead him on to his total ruin. To try to bring on that ruin, Washington took a calculated risk and sent some of his best officers north. General Benedict Arnold, whose conduct and bravery he greatly admired, as well as Colonel Daniel Morgan and his sharpshooting frontiersmen from Virginia.
General Washington is certainly a most surprising man. One of nature's geniuses. A heaven-born general, if there is any of that sort. That a Negro driver should, with a ragged banditti of undisciplined people, the scum and refuse of all nations on earth, so long keep a British general at bay. It is astonishing. It is too much. Nicholas Cresswell.
Burgoyne remained confident he would capture Albany. He assured Lord Germain that the obstacles the Patriots were placing in the path of his army were merely acts of desperation and folly. He had once hoped to join forces with General Howe on the Hudson River, but Howe was already headed for Philadelphia.
General Howe can't go overland through New Jersey because the Americans are strong enough that they could really harass the column that he has to send down there. So he decides to send his force by ship.
With favorable winds, it should have taken the fleet a little over a week. But winds died, or blew the wrong way. Lightning storms split masts and ripped sails. Water and provisions ran low. Instead of trying to sail up the Delaware River under Patriot guns, the British would go still further south and approach Philadelphia via the Chesapeake Bay.
I wish we could but fix upon their object. Their conduct is really so mysterious that you cannot reason upon it so as to form any certain conclusions.
When Washington finally got word that the British had entered the Chesapeake, he realized where they were headed and hurried his army to defend Philadelphia.
I think there can be no doubt that Howe aims at this place. He gives us an opportunity of exerting the strength of all the Middle States against him, while New York and New England are destroying Burgoyne. Now is the time. Never was so good an opportunity for my countrymen to turn out and crush that vaporing, blustering bully to atoms. John Adams.
How about 450? 450? Your bunches.
On the Tonight Show, reactions. A new type of TV show.
Our Earth can be overpopulated. Either when there's pressure in an area from more people in a place than the area can support, or when even a small number of people apply pressure by overusing the resources in an area. And both types of overpopulation sound like a big deal, especially when we think about how we're using our resources and the other effects on our environment. But if we check out global news over the last few decades, we'd see something that seems counterintuitive. Policies encouraging people to have more kids, basically to increase the population. In the early 2000s, countries across Europe, and especially Eastern Europe, started to notice an alarming trend. Fewer and fewer babies were being born. So countries like Estonia began implementing new policies like benefits and payments to encourage people to have more children. So it seems like we're getting some mixed messages. While we worry about there being too many people for the planet to support, we can also worry about how fewer people in a given place may affect the economy what may happen when there are more elderly people who need healthcare than there are healthcare workers, or even be concerned about how many people are necessary to carry on a language, religion, or other aspects of culture. Population is more complex than just having too many or too few people. But when we understand what drives the population of a place, whether we're talking about movement in and out of a country or how many people are being born or are dying, we can begin to understand future patterns of urban and rural growth, cultural changes, and even political movements. I'm Alize Carrere, and this is Crash Course Geography. As population geographers, we focus on the spatial aspects of populations, or specific groups of people, like where people are located, why they're located there, and how the location and number of people impact a place. Like in India, we're losing habitat in the region that is the genetic hearth, or birthplace, of many varieties of banana. So we might look at how the banana diffused as people traveled and then migrated along the Silk Roads over many centuries. Then we'd look at when the habitat started to decline and make note of who was using the land and how they were using it. Maybe the density, or number of people per square kilometer, had changed, or the economic or political practices, or both. As the land use changes, we'd look for how humans have driven that change. In fact, while worrying about natural resources and the impact of population feels like a very 21st century climate crisis thing, scholars have been talking about overpopulation for a couple hundred years now. Back in 1798, British economist Thomas Malthus first proposed what we now call the Malthusian prediction. Based on what he was seeing in Britain, where agricultural production was increasing linearly, but the population seemed to be increasing exponentially, he concluded that the world would soon be overrun by people who would use up all of the available resources. Malthus also argued that poverty causes population growth, and that adding more people to the planet would doom us all. Today, there are about 7 billion more people on the planet than in 1798, so Malthus hasn't been right yet. But while many of Malthus's ideas were disproven, the idea that poverty and population growth are linked stuck around. In fact, between the 1940s and 1960s, it resurfaced as part of growing environmental awareness. This neo-Malthusian movement pointed back to Malthus's arguments, sounding an alarm that there were too many people on the planet, and soon there wouldn't be enough resources for everyone. Malthusian ideas, like that we should be wary of outstripping our resources and that poverty is to blame, led to global movements to encourage poor countries to achieve lower birth rates. But
honestly, one thing that's been a big part of my life that's really helped me gain more clarity is therapy. I've never felt more sure.
But not everyone agreed with the rather convenient, for wealthy countries, argument that global environmental disaster was the fault of poor people. Like Danish economist Esther Boserup, who in 1965 published what's sometimes called the Boserup theory, or agricultural intensification. Unlike Malthus, Boserup argued that people innovate, and in particular, the agriculture sector only innovates when there's pressure from having more mouths to feed. So poor people weren't going to use up all the resources like Malthus thought, and disaster wasn't imminent. What Malthus and Boserup were both getting at were ideas of carrying capacity, which in human geography means how many people a given environment can support. Rather than blame over or underpopulation, today when population sizes increase or decrease, a population geographer will ask questions to figure out what's happening in that place and how humans are putting pressure on the environment. We also use the tools of demography, or the study of population, to study how populations change over space and time. Demography often includes lots of statistics, like birth rate, which we've already mentioned, and death rate, or the mortality rate. One tool demographers use is the demographic transition model, which tries to approximate how different birth and death rates lead to population change and how that ties into the economy. In fact, it was originally created to model how population size might respond to changes in the economy, like within or between agricultural, manufacturing, or even service-based economies. Like any mathematical model, the demographic transition model isn't perfect because predicting the future is hard. In particular, the demographic transition model was developed based on population patterns in Western Europe and North America, and doesn't always capture patterns in lower income or non-white populations. And while we read the stages from left to right, when using the model, it's important to remember that economic development and population changes aren't strictly sequential. It's possible for dramatic events like a war or an environmental disaster to create conditions that cause populations and economies to skip back and forth between stages. But we'll still talk through them from left to right. In the demographic transition model, stage 1 populations have high birth and high death rates, which end up balancing each other out, more or less. So the population size is roughly small but steady. Before the Industrial Revolution, every country would have been considered a stage 1 country, but today none exist. A stage 2 population is one that is growing rapidly, like the population of Western Europe when Malthus was writing in the 18th century. Lots of people are being born, but fewer and fewer people are dying. Better healthcare and nutrition mean that people are living longer. In 2020, there were only a few countries considered stage 2, like Yemen. And to see what a high birth rate and low death rate means for the overall population and trends over time, we can use another demography tool called a population pyramid. A population pyramid allows us to see historic impacts on population and also predict future growth and decline, which helps governments allocate resources. From this pyramid, we can see that in 2020, there was a steady decline in population after 10 years old and a sharper decline after 44 years old. So this is a time as population geographers, we can ask questions to see what's happening in Yemen. Turns out there's been conflict and war in the region going back to at least 2011, and that dip represents some of the people who have died in the conflicts. But overall, a triangular pattern like this tends to indicate that the population will continue to increase. While there aren't many countries in the Stage 2 category, in 2020, a large number of the world's countries fit in Stage 3. This stage is where both death rates and eventually birth rates start to decrease. So our population growth rate starts to slow down. In fact, the world's population growth rate, or the rate of natural increase which only considers births and deaths and ignores migration, was actually at its highest in 1963. But in 2021, there's still a lot of population momentum. The birth rate might be getting smaller, but bigger and bigger groups of people are getting old enough to have kids. So the world population will still increase for a few more generations until the number of people who aren't old enough to have kids is smaller than the number who are. Which brings us to the final stage we'll discuss. Stage 4, where countries have slow to declining population growth. Across Eastern Europe, there's been an economic stagnation after the wars and economic decline of the 1990s. And instead of leading to high birth rates like might happen in a Stage 1 or 2 country, the lack of economic opportunity leads to voluntary migration. Kind of a double population whammy. As people leave, there are fewer people to support the economy and take care of the aging population. So Stage 4 countries, like Japan or Germany, or even some Stage 3 countries like Estonia, are trying to create incentives for people to both stay in the country and have more children. What we can learn from demographic tools like the demographic transition model or by studying population pyramids is that the interplay between birth rates, death rates, and migration requires a lot of context. But we can use this information to better understand the relationship between people, their economic security, and their impact on the resources they use. Globally, there have been drastic efforts to reduce population sizes in the name of saving the environment or resources, like restrictions on the number of children a family can have, or even forced sterilization programs. But by looking at more than just population size, we can notice that most places where the birth rate comes down have a few things in common, especially economic security and the role of women in society. In societies where economic security is shaky, or where children rarely make it to adulthood, or where there is no guaranteed retirement income, there's often a high birth rate. And countries have found that if they want to encourage a decrease in birth rate, one of the fastest ways to help that happen is to empower women. Many different studies show each year of education a woman has decreases the birth rate by 5 to 10%. And education combined with access to good-paying jobs is a major factor in the total fertility rate, or the average number of children a person is expected to give birth to over the course of their reproductive years. A population geographer uses all of these tools to assemble the population trends into a picture that helps us understand the role they play in economic and environmental issues.
We'll be right back after this commercial break. You're listening to Reactions, a new TV show, with your host, Raul Morales.
Face the difficulties of today and tomorrow. I still have a dream. Yeah. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream.
We'll be right back after this commercial break. Something's gotta give. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Reactions, a new TV show with your host, Raul Morales. History, life, history and life.
Welcome everybody back.
History and life, it's what you make of it. And we'll just leave it at that. God bless.
What the world needs now.
You're listening to Reactions, a new TV show with your host, Raul Morales.
It's the only thing that there's just too little love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Hey, no, not just for some, but for everyone. Lord, we don't need another mountain. There are mountains and hillsides enough to climb, and there are oceans and rivers enough to cross, enough to last till the end of time. What the world needs now is love, sweet love, sweet love. It's the only thing that there's just too little love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love, sweet love. Not just for some, but for everyone. We don't need another meadow. There are cornfields and wheat fields enough to grow, and there are sunbeams and moonbeams enough to shine. So listen, Lord, please listen if you wanna know. Say what the world needs now is love, sweet love, sweet love. Yeah, it's the only thing that there's just too little love. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. Not just for some, but for
Smile, though your heart is aching. Smile, even though it's breaking. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by if you smile. Through your fear and sorrow, smile, and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness, hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be smile. What's the use of crying? You find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.
You're listening to Reactions, a new TV show with your host, Raul Morales.
See the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile. What's the use of crying? You find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. You will find that life's worthwhile if you just smile.
Major. Marlin, sir. Good morning. Good morning. In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interest. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. And should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.
If you keep thinking yesterday's thoughts, you'll keep living yesterday's life. That's not destiny. That's a habit loop. If your thoughts affect how you feel, and your feelings in any given moment affect how you behave in that moment, then your thoughts are controlling your life, so change them. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness watching it all unfold. So today, think a new thought. Feel a new emotion, and reality will follow. Because when you remember you're the observer, you stop being the prisoner.
Are like a radio signal, and your reality is just what's playing on the station you're tuned into. Fear, lack, regret, one station. Love, purpose, abundance, another. You don't need to fix the outside world. Just shift your internal dial. You are the receiver. Change your signal, and the entire broadcast of your life changes with it. Your thoughts are like a radio signal, and your reality is just what's playing on the station you're tuned into. Fear, lack, regret, one station.
love, purpose, abundance, another. You don't need to fix the outside world. Just shift your internal dial.
You're listening to Reactions, a new TV show with your host, Raul Morales. I thank everyone for listening. May you live your life and enjoy it.
I should go around weeping. I should care. I should go without sleeping. Strangely enough, I sleep well, except for a dream or two. But then I count my sheep well. Funny how she can lull you to sleep, and I should care. I should let it upset me. Ooh, I should care. But it just doesn't get me. Maybe I won't find someone as lovely as you. But I should care, and I do.
That's all, folks. Thank you so much for listening to Reactions, a new TV show with your host, Raul Morales. Now on iHeartRadio and all platforms.